Так, всем привет. Давайте кто-нибудь напишет, слышно ли нас. So it usually takes a while before it goes live. Напишите, слышно ли нас, и тогда мы начнем. Так, so we are waiting before somebody writes that he can read and hear us. Так, ну что. Окей, я сам слышу.
Слышно, видно?
Да, слышно, видно. Окей, всем здравствуйте, мы снова с вами, и у нас сегодня в гостях важный для меня, для нас гость. Это Бернардо Андраде де Сена, американо-португальский режиссер, автор и, не побоюсь этого слова, мыслитель. Вот. Кто читает, следит за моим каналом, я публиковал пару статей его, которые я переводил, и которые мы с ним в соавторстве писали, выкладывал одну короткометражку и так далее. Вот. И сегодня мы попробуем поговорить с вами на английском языке о политике и эзотерике. So, Bert, hello.
Hello.
Sorry for my long Russian speech. I just introduced you as a American-Portuguese director, author, and thinker. So, what do you think? Is that definition correct?
Why didn't you say an occultist?
Occultist, right?
I was more I was more prominently involved in the occult about 5 years ago, realistically, than I am now. So to be honest, I think an occultist, saying you're an occultist would technically mean that you're actively in practice and engaging in the study. I was doing that for many years, since I was even a teenager. So I'm 36 now, but like for maybe up until 30 years of age, I stopped actively pursuing it, because it's a full-time, well, whether you do it as a pastime, it's a full-time hobby, but it's also a full-time pursuit. But it has still a strong influence in my life, in terms of my writing, in terms of my ideas and projects that I work in. So I don't know if I could say right now, realistically, if I am a definitive occultist, but I was, yeah.
So before we start on our topic, I wanted to ask you some questions about yourself. So you are, about your background. So you are Portuguese, your parents are Portuguese, but you were born in America, in New York. How come?
Correct. How come?
So what did your parents do in New York, and so on?
So the reason my parents went to New York, there's a two-side of the story. So the first side is that after the 25th of April, which was the revolution in Portugal against the so-called dictatorship of Salazar's regime, which was not really a dictatorship, but there were many communists going after a lot of members or ex-members of the Estado Novo, which is the Republic of Salazar, the regime. So this was military personnel, which all of my family, I mean, everyone in Portugal pretty much was in the military personnel. I mean, it was a draft. So, you know, my father was a lieutenant, and I had an uncle who was a captain, so in the Air Force. And my grandfather, which was my mother's father, he was the head of the, what do you call it, the security, the bodyguard of Salazar. Yeah, he was part of the what was the name now? Good Lord, it was the name of I think it was the PID, Portuguese secret. I just anyway. He was
PID or something like that.
It was the PID. It was the PID. Yeah, it was the PID, and he was the head of the security personnel of Salazar, and he had threats. Some of my other family members. Not my father or my mother, but he was getting threats that they wanted to kill him, basically. They were trying to kill him. So my father, you know, he's a resourceful guy, so he started pulling everything together, pulling strings. He was kind of associated with the government at the time. And he decided, okay, let's move to to New York. He found a way, and he took. I wasn't born at the time, but it was basically my father, my mother, her parents, and my older brother who had just been born in Lisbon. But because he was so young, he's declared American because of the exchange. So he went to the United States. He started a life in the United States. My father was working from zero, kind of like me. He was going to a new place, starting from nowhere. My mother was more proficient in English, so she started managing to find work in banking and stuff like this. And her parents also, they were working from nothing because they didn't know English. So it was very kind of tricky situation, but then I was born, and then by that time my dad was already kind of more involved with the Portuguese government in terms of diplomacy, so he's working in the diplomatic corps. So and yeah, that's how I ended up.
And then you moved to Brussels.
Yeah, then he was transferred to Brussels
as a diplomat.
Yes, correct. And then I moved to Brussels, and I was quite young when I moved. So
how old were you?
About 6 years old. So I didn't live too. I mean, I visited the US all the time because I had family also there, and I had a lot of friends. But yeah, I mean, I predominantly lived my childhood, I'd say, in Belgium.
In Belgium, in Brussels. So
yeah.
You went to European School of Brussels, which is a rather famous school. Just to name two of people which also attended it is Boris Johnson and the current Prime Minister of Great Britain, and Ursula von der Leyen, former Minister of Defense of Germany and now the Secretary of European Commission. So that were people you
apparently Brian Molko also.
Brian Molko, yeah,
from Placebo.
Yeah. So well, that says something about it. Tell me, was it the time when you started to being involved with occultism? Was it when you were at school?
So I got into occult. The pathway into the occult for me was because at a very early age, from Brussels at least, I was fascinated with folklore and fairy tales. I would just eat it up. I was reading all sorts of fairy tales and folklore, the Brother Grimm, Hans Christian Andersen. I was getting into all of that, and then slowly, getting into that, it sort of pushed me into the paranormal, as I call it. So some people call it supernatural, but I don't like that term. But the paranormal. So I was very interested in ghosts and all these type of things, and one thing leads to another, because with the paranormal you enter also into very what I call light conspiracy, and so there's a lot of these like conspiracy things about secret societies and stuff, and then slowly you start getting more into this. And so I was about, I think, maybe like 10, 11, 12 when I started really getting more into studying more into like different world cultures and these sort of secret societies, and also into theological subjects, and so they sort of overlap, because
this is what I wanted to ask from you. So seems that like Belgium or European Union is fulfilled with those like secret societies and stuff like that. Really?
Belgium is a massive, like something that I didn't even realize until later, is that Belgium is actually a massive center point for a lot of this secret sort of organizations and these sort of a lot of bizarre also movements that sort of congregate there. And you'd think it would be Germany, and I do believe that Germany has some as well. But Belgium is now a sort of center point, specifically Brussels, actually. And most people are not familiar with that, but even I wasn't aware as I was growing up. This only came later when I started uncovering a lot more, and then realizing, wait a second, these people I met, they're kind of strange. And then this you meet these people along your development as you're growing up, and then you realize this guy was connected to that and this, and
so somehow you started to be involved into this occult life of
I
Brussels.
So I never joined anything personally, because that was something I decided from a very early stage. So my path, so to speak, there's two types of styles of like going into the occult. like to learn hidden knowledge, which is the initiatic path, which means you go through a hierarchy and you have to sort of, it's like a quid pro quo thing. It's like, oh, you let me in and then I have to do this. And then there's the other path, which is the wandering path, which is the path that I sort of took all the time, which is the hermetic path, meaning you just throw yourself into it, but you never join anything. You just go your way, but you take everything in. And I did that with a lot of stuff. So that's sort of in my early age, how I got into a lot of different religions, not joining the religion, but I just exposed myself to it. So I would go to churches, I would look into Satanism, I looked into all of this stuff. And expose myself to it and just get an idea. But I never joined something specifically. Interestingly enough, I was offered to join many times.
Tell us more about it.
So, there's a point that when you get into this type of world, you start meeting a lot of people and you start getting to know a lot of people. And so obviously you're going to always be confronted with a lot of people who, because you know information and you understand certain things, you're talking in the same language, so they want to bring you in, because that's the idea behind, you know, these different groups. It's like, oh, you know, this type of knowledge, you can be of benefit and we can help you, etc. So it was around my late teens, like in 1920, like when I started really getting exposed more. Sorry, not 19. I'm bad with timing. I would say 17s, my late teens, 17s until my 19s. I was still in school and I was getting more exposed to a lot of these different sort of groups. But it wasn't until I actually reached into London, which is actually interesting because London is another center point of a lot.
We will talk about it. So now,
right?
Yeah. Who are these people who offered you to join them?
So specifically, it was the Freemasons. I have to be careful as well how much I say about them, because I got into a lot of trouble.
I understand.
In London.
Yeah, you don't have to tell us names, of course.
No, because I'm trying. You know, there's a lot of my history is kind of crazy in relation to these types of people, but there's a lot of good people who are Freemasons. I know some. And they're good people. They watch my back as well, and they've helped me out. But there's also there's another side of it too. So it's like with anything, you have two sides, you know. And I was invited like maybe about 3 times through suggestion, because they don't just go, "Hey, you want to join?" They don't do it like that. It's what they say. It's like a tapping on the shoulder, and then you turn around, and then they try to bring you into the lodge, and then they try, you know. But I never really wanted to do that, because the moment you get stuck into that, and I know this from other people that I'm familiar with, you're stuck in it. It's like you're branded with this, and this is the case with a lot of societies too. You can't remove yourself, even if you leave. It's still on, you know, it's still like branded on you, and you're known for that. So this is maybe part of the reason why I've always been, you know, I don't want to say attacked, but like they've always come after me, because they're trying to always grab me into their, it's like, no, come to this team. No, come to this team. And I'm like, no, I don't want to join any of these teams. So
were these people somehow connected to the power, circles or some?
They could. I believe a few of them were. So when I was growing up as well, when I was looking into Freemasons, I used to think, oh, the Freemasons, they're involved with, you know, everything. There's a book by Stephen Knight that sort of exposes it. He got into the Freemasons because he was trying to actually originally look into, you know, the murders of the Jack the Ripper murders. And he thought he saw a connection between Jack the Ripper murders, because of where they found the victims, which were located near Freemasonic lodges and sites and churches, which is true. He then decided to go into it, and he made an expose about the in a book. And then he died. Let's just put it at that. He conveniently died, and not of natural causes. And so a lot of stuff related to them. Yes, there's a big power group, but 70% of the people who are Freemasons, they don't know what the heck is going on. They're just like, they think it's a gentleman's club, and they treat it like a gentleman's club. They treat it for business networking and stuff like that's what they think it is. And they have no clue. They don't take the rituals seriously. They don't take the sort of mysticism seriously behind it. I would say the 30% on top of them, they take it seriously because they're the ones more in the know. But 70%, which is the majority, it's just sort of like a drinking club. Oh, I go to the lodge and they don't know. So those are the ones that you see, you know, in the news saying like, oh no, Freemasonry, it's there's nothing about it, but there's a lot more. It's just that they don't know. It's like in any hierarchical system, like the military, it's need to know basis. So you have to climb up to understand, and you don't get up easily. You don't get up easily, you know.
Yeah,
so
I would absolutely agree to that because I've also been invited to a lodge in Berlin. In Grunewald, there is a villa where they have their meetings. So I've been to 2 or 3 of these meetings, and one of the guys, first of all, they were just normal guys, like, you know, they were like businessmen, but also there was, I think, even one like waiter or something like that. Although it's quite expensive to be in the lodge, so they have you have to pay a certain amount each month, and it's not it's not a small amount. But anyway, I was talking to one guy, and he said exactly that most of people, they use it as a club, as a place where you can conveniently sit and talk. So I remember we spent like 3 evenings we were talking, and one of them we were talking about Marquis de Sade, for example. So the whole evening about
exquisite.
So anyway, I can only confirm that it's basically it looks exactly like this. And the guy also said that there are basically 2 ways. There are this esoteric part or esoteric wing of Masons, Freemasons, and the other one is more about
like
connection
more
and
sociable.
So so what most people don't understand about Freemasons is that there's an ongoing war between the lodges, and there's like different lodges, and there's more lodges, as I understood, as I was getting more into it, that exist. It's not just the red lodge and the blue lodge, you know, the whole matrix thing with the red pill, blue pill. It's actually based on this too. Everything is interconnected. Like it's referencing symbolism here. The red lodge representing the York Rite, or the York Lodge, and then you have the Scottish Rite, which is the Scottish Lodge, which is the one that's specifically used to attain into another secretive circle, which is the Templars, the Knights Templar. However, there's another way to get into the Knights Templar, which do exist. I met a Knights Templar in London, and he was like 90 years old, and he was a nice guy, but he was he was like saying, yeah, you don't want to get into this unless you're ready to get into this. And then you have, of course, the Orient Lodge, or the Paris Lodge. This is a totally separate thing from
that was the one they offered me to join, basically,
the Grand Orient Lodge, right? So they're very interesting because they have a totally different operation to the York and to the Scottish. Now, the York and the Scottish, they can find a combination in some ways with certain things, like you can find interconnection, but they also have conflict of interests. For instance, the red and the blue is kind of really significant because it goes back to also the American Revolution, where the majority of American Freemasons are all York Rite Freemasons. You won't find Scottish Rite Freemason. When you're a Knights Templar, it's something very specific to, for instance, linked not only to the royal dynasty, and I'm not talking about the Queen of England, but like to the royal dynasty. This links back to, like, you know, the Arthurian and the Templar connection that goes all the way back to King Solomon. So this is it's a bit separate. The York Rite is a bit different, and so you have these different lodges, and then you have also the Italian one, which is a bit trickier, but they call it like Pedu, and that's a different type of lodge as well that they have that exists in Italy, and it's conflict of interests. That's the thing. There's a conflict.
what do you think? How much of Brussels, of European politics and so on is really
linked to the Freemasons?
Linked, or is yeah.
I would say a large number of politicians are Freemasons. It's not something. Yeah, but at the same time, I'm not trying, because, you know, a lot of presidents of the United States were also Freemasons. But the thing is, I think people get the wrong idea here, because literally the majority of people who are Freemasons, like I said, unless it's a sort of quid pro quo network. So that's what it's used for. And the higher up you go, yeah, you know, you start. I can't tell you, like, realistically, like, what the majority really believe in the mystical practices and the rituals. But I would say that a majority of politicians who are involved with Freemasonry, they probably don't. It's just probably like a boys' club or something like this. That's how they're treated. And most people don't even know this, but there isn't, they think the highest degree, if I ask you, what is the highest degree? You'd say, oh, it's the 33rd degree, but it's not the 33rd degree. There's a higher degree than that. So you see, even all these conspiracy people, they say, like, oh no, he's a 32nd degree Mason. He's, you know, he's pulling the strings, you know, Obama or whatever, like Bush, he's a 32nd degree Mason. Well, that's not the highest degree. You don't have that much power, 32nd degree. That's what they want you to believe. Highest degree in Freemasonry is 90th degree. And I don't know if I should be even saying that, because you have to, 90th degree, only one person holds that position, the 90th degree. Because everything with Freemasonry is representative with, so they believe in the mystical part of it, they believe in the fundamentals of what magic is. So magic, when we say magic, it's not Harry Potter. It exists, but magic exists in a different way. There's a sort of, and I say scientific in terms of the original meaning of the word, meaning knowledge. There's a hidden meaning behind magic. So magic can be evoked in 3 manifestations, which is the image, the word, and the ritual. So these are the 3 major components, the 3 pillars, so to speak, that you can manifest magic. So magic is a form of science, like let's say science or technology, right? That you can manipulate events and manipulate things, and we've seen this.
This is what I talk all the time about. Yeah.
Yeah, and the higher up you go in the higher echelons of, like, for instance, something like Freemasonry, Freemasonry is all related to the concept of Solomonic magic, and also ideas behind, like, architecture, everything. So that's why they're using this iconography and the symbolism related to that. So if you look at, like, for instance, something like the symbol of the Freemasons, it's something like that. Right. So it's the compass and the square. The square is 90 degrees, and the compass is 33 degrees. So who's the square? The square is on top. Why is the square on top? Because as above, so below. It is a representation, right? It's a representation of the Godhead, not God, but the Godhead. The square. You square the circle, and that's the point. So there is a person who is really the top dog, and that's all, and that's based on the lodge. Who's the top dog of that lodge? And when we're talking about a lodge, I'm talking about the whole, like the Scottish Rite or the York Rite, or, you know, the Grand Orient, which is in Paris, or, you know, the P2. So that's something that people don't recognize. They think, oh, the 33rd degree, that's the highest. No. 33rd degree means that you have more authority, but you're not in charge. So, and it gets more complex as you get up into that. So anyway, sorry. Yeah.
Well, right. No, that was obviously very interesting, and right. So let's let's go. Or we have basically, guys, we have on Zoom we have only like 30 minutes, I guess, and we have 3 minutes left. So we have to do one little question like for 3 minutes, and then we go on a break.
Okay.
So we can start a new session. So Olga, do you want to ask something maybe?
So basically, that's only a stupid interest. So have you ever been? Did you participate in rites or ceremonies somewhere in order or whatever, or whenever else? I don't know.
I have participated in certain things. they weren't necessarily related to big societies. One in particular I did, but I was more of an observer. So I don't want to say I was involved. That one in particular is kind of tricky to talk about because they do kind of scare me. They have a lot of power. I mentioned it, I think, already in the past to Dmitry, and they have a lot of power, specifically in Belgium. And so I can talk about it briefly, but I'm not going to get into too much detail because
I'm not in... Anyway, we have only 2.5 minutes, so you want.
But this is I can basically say that in this ritual, when I was much younger, because I was observing it, it's where I actually was exposed to adrenochrome, which I didn't know what that was at the time. So this is like at around the time that people didn't even know what that was either until much later. And adrenochrome was first referred to by Hunter S. Thompson in Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, a movie where he takes it. So anyone who knows what that is, then they can understand. And I was observing something which I couldn't even understand. I think I wasn't seeing what I was really seeing, but this was a very dark energy type of ritual that I was
Adrenochrome is the thing that it is believed that
taken
getting
from
it from child's organs.
Whether it's taken from children or not, it's specifically the pure fluid from a live adrenaline gland. So when you put something in such stress that you take the adrenaline fluid out, and then ingesting that, it creates such a strong adrenaline rush that you start hallucinating and you start getting very feverish and going through a sort of you go through a sort of psychohallucinogenic.
So guys, we have to go on a break on the. So stay tuned. Yeah, we get back.
A lot of stuff I'm saying, though, it's like, I'm saying it, there's not much I can back up. It's just my experience. So, that's the thing.
That's the most fascinating thing, actually.
But a lot of these things, sometimes I wish I didn't actually go through because it kind of affected me in a bad way.
Guys, we are live now.
Hello?
We're back,
right,
yeah.
so we are back, and we were...
So the next question I wanted to ask, so we started talking about adrenochrome and things like that, yeah. So the first question, this is true, right?
Yes,
so this is not like conspiracy theory. But
no, it's existed since the 70s, actually. Actually, no, even before the 70s. I'm sorry, because Hunter S. Thompson even knew about it. I only found out what it was when I watched Fear and Loathing Las Vegas when I was 19. I was like, oh wait, I know what this is, because he's going through this, like the movie was showing the guy going through the same stuff that I was going through.
Was it pictured accurately in the movie?
Yeah, it was. You get like really hot, feverish, and you start seeing let's just say you start seeing demons and devils. You don't know what is real anymore. It's and you get very hot. You're sweating. So yeah.
And it happened in Belgium.
Yes.
Oh,
this was because of my affiliation to an order. Anyone can look it up. There's enough information about it. I will say this much, because I don't really want to get these guys on my ass, because they are like, once you are even known by these guys, they know you always. I would suggest looking into a guy called Ronald Bernard. He's was a Dutch big, I think he was a big investor in banking and finance. He talks a lot about this. So anyone who wants to really learn about what I'm talking about, then just look at his thing, because he talks about these guys, and it's not ironic that he is Dutch. And I was in Belgium and I met these types of people too. So, but I chose to like separate myself after that. I said, no, this is not for me. And this is
but you just mentioned you were quite young, right? So
I was about 17, 18. Yeah.
So it means they use children in those sort of rites.
There's younger, well, in the group, in the overall society, there's younger people like that, like I was, not being used, but being to get into it. And there's enough evidence as well that relates to the fact that yes, they do use younger people in these rituals.
So
I would just say that I was in Belgium. I'll say this because I really don't want any connection to these guys, and because this is going public and stuff, I really am careful about this. I say this in person only, but these guys have been sort of referred to briefly. A lot of them, if you know what the time I grew up in Belgium, which was of course during 1996, a very significant scandal broke out.
Okay.
Look into that scandal in Belgium, specifically Liège and stuff, and then you'll get an idea of what I'm talking about. But
I'll Google it.
There was a massive scandal.
I know what you mean. There was a certain dirty guy.
Yeah, but that guy was not even the big fish. Like,
I understand. I remember the thing very clearly, and basically to me, it sounds awful now, I know, but to me, every Belgian person seems a pedophile. I can't do anything about it.
That's what they're known for, unfortunately.
Yes, that's what's yeah.
But this is a big group that's very well connected, and yeah.
So then let's move on further. You mentioned London, and that's basically another checkpoint of your biography, so to say, that you moved to London. You studied
there. Yeah, correct.
And you were involved there in some esoteric groups as well, or how was it?
So I didn't really get involved so that's where I was getting really invited to to join the Freemasons, because the Freemasons are huge in London, specifically the city of London, which is a sovereign state. So many people don't know this, but the city of London is if you can find this on Google, if you look up the city of London, and it's a section of it. It's the banking financial district of it. But it's very significant because this is also the location of where you can find the remains of the Templars temple. It's very close to St. Paul's. St. Paul's is within the district, by the way.
Yeah, I know. I've been there.
Right, and you know the perimeter of it because there's dragons, Templar dragons all over. And I worked in the city, I lived very close to the city at one point. So I came across a lot of these characters. And in fact, they're not, like I said, like with the Freemasons, they're not so... Since Stephen Knight's book exposed them, and some other people, like Blood Brothers, that was another very important book that was exposing it, back in the 60s and the 70s. They had a PR, they have now a PR section. In fact, every Freemason lodge has a PR section now. They have like, you know, oh, you wanted it? And they did this on purpose, so they publicly exposed certain things on purpose. But this was also to minimalize, you know, oh, we're not this like strange group of people, which is convenient. But so you can go to, for instance, the station in what is it called now? In Holborn, near Holborn, you'll find the Queen Street, and all across the Queen Street from Holborn to I think it's up to Leicester Square. You'll find also like the Freemasons' arms, and you'll find the Freemasonic Lodge on Queen Street, and that's not also coincidence. It's on Queen Street for a reason. And there's even a Freemasonic shop and everything like that. And I came across a lot of these people by chance, just because I was showing, I used to do like tours to some friends and show them like the symbolism and stuff, and they would overhear me. And yeah, so I was approached 3 times.
That's that's very funny, because that's exactly what happened to me, because I went to the Masonic villa in Grunewald just to look at the architecture and stuff, because I was told that this is a place where they gather. And
you're lucky bastards. I've never been invited to any like
because you are a woman.
Well, no, there is the Masonic Lodge, which developed in also the 60s and the 70s over a period of time, which was the Lodge of the I think it's called the Lodge of the Morning Star, or the Eastern Star. Sorry, the Eastern Star, and that is the only lodge that allows females and males, and it's much more predominant in, for instance, the United States. But Germany, they also have it in Europe.
I guess there was nothing like that. So they where we gathered, the women were not allowed to enter. So, and the waitresses staff, for example, they knew they can only go till this line, and further they can't enter the room further than the line. And I was told, okay, we make the gatherings also for the women, for example, for wives of the brotherhood. They also gather, and they also have their own small playground, but it's not the
an interesting thing though is they will allow trans women, or whatever, that female to male. You're allowed.
Allowed?
Yeah, but yes. Oh. So if you're a female and you transition to a male, you are allowed.
You are technically a male, basically.
Yeah, that they accept.
No, I'm not ready to that.
Then I would recommend the Eastern Lodge, the Eastern Star Lodge. Yeah.
That's good. I'm very enlightened. Right. Right. So, but back to London, and so you were seeing all these symbolics there in the city.
Right. So the thing is, at the same time, of course, like I said, I was studying and I was conversing and I was communicating also with a lot of different people at the time. I was with my memory lapses, but like I was familiar with a lot of people, like from Arctus Press, and also from now it's called Newman Books. It was called Primordial Traditions at the time. It was a publishing house which had a lot of also collected scholars and occultists. This is how I got to know people like Troy Southgate, who's now in Portugal. He was actually, little known fact, I wrote a piece for him, which now I realize is popularized, but the term anarcho-fascist, or fascio-anarchist, that came from me, because I wrote a whole piece about this, which he first published. And I've tried to distance myself from that.
You invented anarcho-fascism. Whoa.
Technically, I coined the term. Yes, yeah. So I've tried to distance myself from that now, because it was related to more of a concept of the dynamic political shifting from one to the other. But it's not really an ideology. But nowadays, I see a lot of young people use this now, like, oh, I'm an anarcho-fascist, and it's like, okay, funny. But yes, I met people like Troy Southgate, and I met Damon Licorinos, and Gwendolyn Taunton, and there are many different characters who are quite prolific right now online. And also, you know, I got familiar with Dugan, and I got familiar with a lot of these different characters. So it was like a hodgepodge of a lot of different people in India, Australia, UK, etc. And I got involved in that, but that was more from a scholastic academic side of things. At the same time, as I was developing into that arena, I was also very involved in what I would call like, it would have been referred to at the time, this would have been the early 2000s, as the truth movement or the conspiracy circles of like a lot of different characters like David Icke and so forth. And I also was linked to a lot of these people. But, you know, after a while, you can find a lot of interconnecting points. Because that's the trouble with both these fields, they interconnect, but at the same time, it can also get you into like a rabbit hole. And then I got really caught up with doing or saying too much because, you know, as I said, I wasn't part of the initiative path. So I didn't follow any rules. I was of the wandering path. I was just like Diogenes. I do what I say. And
sorry to interrupt. So your approach is more heuristic. So you expect your life being as an opus magna, right?
Yeah. So I've built my experience based on what I've exposed myself to, and I learned from that. So this is pretty much based. It is the Socratic principle, actually. I follow. For me, Socrates is a massive influence to my philosophical life awareness, and also individuals like Diogenes. So and those are in terms of philosophy, but I apply that principle. So I'm very hermetic in terms of how I understand things, and I digest it. And I spend, you know, across the world, I've spent time with different, like in the United States, with indigenous people too, like the Cherokee Indians, where I learned a lot in Florida about them. And I tried to learn, and I tried to put my awareness into my own experiential knowledge. That's where I feel is most beneficial, instead of someone just telling me. Because the thing is, I can learn that, which I've discovered. I knew a lot more than people who are going through that method, because I would talk to some people.
In fact, this is the most difficult approach, but yeah, and also the most, how to say, the most useful, I guess.
Most fruitful.
I guess, it really depends, I guess, on the character of the person. So for me, it worked for me, and it's what made me get always these encounters with these significant individuals, and like these Templars or these Freemasons, and, you know, whatever. But at the same time, it also gives you a different perception of your world. So a lot of other people, they follow a system. I choose my system. And
exactly,
and it's been beneficial, but it's also been kind of very difficult too, because you have to always deal with a lot of conflicts along the way. But like I said, many times I've spoken to these people who are connected to these lobbies or these lodges or these societies. I find that they don't know as much as, for instance, I do. And so they're like, oh, how do you know this? And it's like, well, because I've exposed myself a lot more, whereas you've kept yourself within the perimeter or the parameters of what you're focused in. So you're not looking at, you know. So I think it's two different approaches. I've met also people who've gone through that approach, and they're very knowledgeable too. But it depends on what you put into it, I think. So, yeah.
Right. What do you think about, there are people, there are lots of people in Russia, or not lots, but it's a certain group of people who think that Great Britain rules the world. That's all the countries, including Russia, for example, are crypto colonies of Great Britain.
No, not at all.
No.
So Great Britain has a lot of influence. Yes, it does have a lot of influence in a cultic way with certain royal families. So the Belgian and the Portuguese. The Portuguese doesn't exist anymore. The Belgian still exists because they're interrelated.
As a monarchy.
Yeah, and the Queen is in fact the Queen is in fact the head of the Scottish Lodge. She's the head, and she's female.
She's the head. Yeah. Oh, I didn't know.
The only reason she's the head is because she's the monarch. It doesn't matter if you're female or male. You're the head. That's it. So she's the 90th degree. So she does have power in that respect. But no, I think a lot of people are confusing like how much influence certain things do, and that's what I learned as well, like getting involved with the conspiracy stuff. You know, people are saying like, oh, the Vatican, City of London, and Washington D.C., it's the trifecta, and they manipulate everything. And you know, London is the financial, Washington is political, Vatican is the religious. There is some truth to it, but it's not 100%. It's not as simple as that. But so the thing is, you have to understand, it's like if you go into business, if anyone has any awareness of business, it's the same thing as business. You have like different firms and different companies, and you have big monopolies, and they're fighting against each other. So on one side you have Amazon, on the other side you have something like Facebook, and they're fighting. But it looks like they're friendly, but they're not. They're also competing and fighting against each other because Facebook wants obviously domination over Amazon. So it's the same thing. It's the same system. So there's not like there's not this cabal of like one person that, you know, runs the whole game. But you do have components. You do have a lot of components from different, you know, groups that are embedded in different political organizations that are trying to push for it. So it's not unlike business, you know.
So
like
they would like to, but they don't.
No, they don't. I think realistically, there is a power group of pushers and influencers of interests, and you find this in things like the trilateral commission, or you have it in the Bilderberg group. But again, these are people coming from different backgrounds too, so they're pushing towards it, but it's not like they have the full power over everything, because you have different interests. You know, I belong to Microsoft. Oh, you belong to Facebook. We can agree on this. Let's do this because we can collectively benefit. But wait, I have other interests above yours, and that's what people miss. They think it's not as black and white as people think it is. That's the difference, at least from my experience of meeting with these types of people. So.
That was my question, basically, which is of great interest for me, is because esoterics and mystics and all things like that, it adds to a vision of a person. It makes you more visionary, basically, than a businessman or whatever, or a politician. So it learns you basically to have a certain vision. So that's and that's what I always wanted to understand about politicians. For example, in Brussels, also, how much is that of a vision, and how much of business and current interests, very short-term interests. So
I would say that a lot. Like if we go even back to the Tsar of Russia, you know, there was a reason why Rasputin was involved. If you go back to the court of Versailles, there was a reason why le Comte de Saint-Germain was involved with. If people think that there's no mysticism or some sort of occultic affiliation to power, like with politics at least, or finance, they're very misguided, because there is a lot. So you often find with a lot of these types of people, like let's take something as basic even as Madonna. She has her guru, you know, and the guru is telling her advice and things like this, and that's Madonna. And Madonna, as basic as she is, she's a business. She's a, you know, so a lot of these people, they have this connection to it. So Netanyahu, no, sorry, I don't know how to pronounce his name. Netanyahu in Israel, he also has his own advisor. If we go back to the ancient times, we remember that there was the king or the pharaoh or whatever, and there was a vizier. The vizier was an alchemist. He was someone who would like give him the advice, like this is what you would do. You still have this today.
This is what I'm also talking about all the time, that Kremlin seems to be there. They also have their own astrologists, maybe Kabbalists.
For sure. Yeah, for sure. 100%. So, you know, they have their own influences, their own, viziers, so to speak, that give them information.
And do you think
it depends
that it's right? Do you think it should be so?
I think the trouble is that whether it should be so or it shouldn't be so, it's always been the case, because you can have, even Alexander the Great,
Yes.
He was a great, he was a philosopher king in many ways. He would always go to the school of Athens because he would want to get information from, and a lot of those people like Plato, Diogenes, who he completely respected, these were Hermeticists as well. These were people who also understood the relevance of mysticism in the paradigm of reality. So I think even Napoleon, like every person, what people don't understand is that this actually does contribute heavily into also the choices and the decisions that are made. So whether it's a good thing or a bad thing, I think it's a human thing, because this is something that has, from my studies and my understanding, it comes back to primordial traditions. It comes back to the times of like the elders and the chiefs, and you'd always have the shaman, and the shaman was equally as respected, because the shaman was something that was very revered and very relevant. So I think whether it's a good or a bad thing, I think the truth of the matter is we want to live in a materialistic world where we think that everything is just like black and white, but actually there's so many layers to it, and we don't see all those layers. So even someone like someone like Putin, I think maybe consults maybe a mystic babushka or something in his own time. I don't know, but maybe he does, and he goes to, I don't know what you call I don't know what you call these, like there's a term in Russian for these witches and stuff like this. Maybe he has someone like this. Huh?
A witch is vedma. Yeah.
That maybe he goes, he goes to, I believe so. And there's all these different things that they're connected to that informs their perception of stuff. Just like with me, I've also been informed, but I get my information not from one particular person. I get it from a higher perception, because I'm more of I read from nature. So again, the Hermetic path is based on reading omens. So you look at the signs and the things.
Yes.
And that's how I make my decisions up and my understanding.
You still do that?
I still do that, yeah, indeed. In fact, it's how I start learning more about how I see the patterns and things, and how I can.
This is what I permanently write in my Telegram channel. The more sophisticated you became in those things, so it's more simple to read signs from more like major things, like I don't know, trees, clouds. To use it in an oracle system, because, like, for example, tarot, runes, and other magic systems, they are for let's say for the beginners, because the system itself already so complicated. It gives you very simply readable answers. That's it. But the more you gather information, the more sophisticated you become. You can read from more complex things.
Sure. And I started learning from reading from things, because I started, like I said, my development was looking into mystical psychology or occultic practices and systems, and specifically Hermeticism, alchemy, and I started getting a lot of understanding of like what I was seeing. So when I read a sign, it would actually represent itself in the reality, because I would see something and then it would reflect itself. And now you can say, oh, this is me doing it. But the thing is, I wouldn't actually actively do anything. I give you one example right now, live. No one's going to believe me, but I have witnesses for this. I have a psychologist, a psychotherapist that I've been seeing for maybe a couple of months. And around, I think it was October or November, I can't be sure, but it was around this time. He was asking me, how are you? He does this, how are you, and so on. And I said, oh, I'm good, but I've been, and then he wanted to ask me, like, we started talking about something that I experienced. And I said, I've been having this kind of dream or vision, and I don't understand what it is, because we're talking about me, because it's to make me feel better. And I said, like, I've had it a few times, and it's like, I feel like around February or March, something's going to happen. And he told me, he said, what do you mean? And I said, well, I just have this like visual, but it's like very bright white. It's just white. It's just like, I don't know if it's negative or positive. But I feel like it's coming. So we start talking. He said, oh, maybe you don't need to see me anymore at that time. Or maybe you're going to get worse, or I don't know, whatever. And I said, yeah, but I don't know. I don't know. Can you tell me what you think? And we talked about it. Fast forward, February, March. What happens?
Yeah.
So, and this isn't me influencing anything. I was literally around the end of summer and the beginning of the autumn, like just a feeling at the back of my head, like February, March, and I had no idea. I was even thinking, oh, maybe it's I'm going to get like a millionaire or something. I don't know. I was thinking other things. So.
I believe you completely, because Olga predicted in a way what happened to us too, and I was witness to that. And
so there you go. So that's the thing. It's like these things happen, and I don't feel like it's something that I'm already thinking of. I could never imagine. I didn't even imagine it at the time. I just saw a bright white light, and I said, something's going to happen February, March. I just don't know what it is. I don't know if it's negative. I don't know if it's positive. I don't feel something bad. But boom, it happened. So now my psychologist, I haven't heard from him again. I think he was shitting himself because he was recording this. So I never heard from him again.
Okay.
So I don't know. Yeah.
Right. Interesting. So, and then your last station and your current station is Berlin, basically. You moved
now,
to
yeah,
Berlin.
But I'm getting tired of Berlin. Yeah, I'm now in Berlin for now. Now it'll be 9 years, but let's see what happens.
I understand. I completely understand you. I spent 15 years in Berlin, and I got enough of it. But anyway, in Berlin, are there certain mystical circles?
There is.
Okay, I know the Freemasons. I mentioned them. I've been
so you want to go into more the political circuit, and I can tell you about this. This I have no problem talking about. So there's a group in Berlin which it's been referenced to as the old guard or the Alte Wache. Okay.
Okay.
And these guys, they are the leftovers of what would have been Imperial Germany. Imperial. Okay.
Imperial.
So they want to return Germany back to its imperial glory. They are very old school in this idealization.
How old are they?
They're pretty old, a lot of these guys, but they're not like ancient. Okay, they're the leftovers of what already existed during what Germany has gone through. They want to return it back to an imperium. This is why they influence a lot of the politics. They influence a lot of what goes on in the EU, for instance. So those people who think that Germany is a considerable influence in the EU, they're not wrong. It's because of these guys. These guys are connected to a lot of shady stuff as well, because all of these people are, in one way or another. They have to be. That's the only way that you're playing the game. The game is not clean, it's dirty. So, but I came across these guys because I got involved in a sort of business relationship with one of these characters. And I started realizing that the more he was giving me information and I was checking it out and I was getting deeper into it, I started realizing this guy's, connected to these people. He's not really these people, but I started understanding the whole process of it. So I was like, no, this is... I give you one example, which you know yourself, Dmitry, which was the fact that there was a group, I'm not going to say the name, but there was a political party here, which was growing in exposure and getting very important. And I was 100% behind them because of the leader. Not because of the party, but the leader.
It was a young right-wing party, let's put it like this.
No, you can say the name. I just don't want to say the name out loud because where I am.
So can I say the name? Well, it's it's Alternative for Germany. So
correct. And who was the leader? The leader was
Frauke Petri.
Genau. So And I was saying, oh, they're going to win. They're going to win. They're the new thing. They're the new thing. And at the time, I was involved with this guy. And they were telling me, no. We should CDU. They wanted CDU. And I said, but why? Because they kept asking me like, oh, we want to do the same thing that they did in the USA. And I said, yeah, but you're not understanding the trends and the dynamics in politics. And then what happened after, I realized after I cut communication with these guys, is that they took my information or whatever, because there was a scandal with the group and they kicked her out. And now the party, as it represents, is no longer the same party. It's completely infiltrated. I don't trust them at all. I know people who have been working there that tell me, oh, it's all corrupt. It's full of these lecherous, perverse types of, it's BS. It's BS because they got into it. That's the thing. And she tried to start a new party,
Mm-hmm.
but didn't succeed because they don't want her to be in power. And I was the one saying, no, she's the one who can do it. So you see, you have to watch out what you say with these people. These guys want to basically establish a new imperium. And they're trying to do that, and they're doing that through the EU. And this is the old guard. They're very racist as well, by the way. They're very racist. They hate anyone outside of the Germanic thing. They're very Russophobic as well. Mm-hmm. They don't like Russia. In fact, these are the guys creating the biggest detente against Russia right now.
Mm-hmm.
Right. We see that.
Yeah. So. These are guys with old money, okay, and they believe they are tied to the imperial dynasties of the past.
I should ask you a couple of questions. For example, are they connected to healthcare?
Yes, completely, 100%, 110%. I can tell you. I know, because that's a whole fucking mafia. Sorry, I apologize for swearing. That's a whole mafia that's connected to them. Yes, completely. Yeah.
Okay, I see.
For sure.
Right.
Healthcare, not only healthcare, but also energy, and insurance, and also infrastructure, like construction and stuff like this. They're connected to all this. And property. I forgot property. Real estate property as well. These guys are very deep in this. Yeah.
Wow. Right. We have, so another session is, we have only 6 minutes before it ends. So what we can do is basically...
do we have any questions?
Questions?
I mean...
Not so much, basically. Well, they say in the rule of Memphis Midstrauma, whatever it is 95 degrees. So classic.
Well, yeah, I've heard about that too. There is, but usually the 90th degree is the head, because you have to understand that it works in terms of if you look at a circle, you square the circle, and the highest point is what? It's the 90th degree. Mm-hmm. So that's the point.
So, and Sergei Izotov writes, there are rules where there are only 3 grades.
3 grades, sorry?
3, there are rules where there are only 3 grades.
For the 70%, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Like, so you have the master mason, etc. You have the different, so the 3rd degree, that's what he's talking about. And in general, that's the highest you can expect to get if you're just a common nobody and you're maybe wealthy and you have good business networks, etc. But there's more beyond that. It's just if you are accepted or you're capable of getting beyond that level. But generally, in terms of like the public sector, they expose only that there's the 3 different degrees. So yeah.
Okay, it's for masonry for dummies.
Pretty much.
Right. So basically, no, I don't have any more questions. I don't know how much of this anybody has understood. I hope.
We didn't really get into politics, but okay.
I hope.
But
sorry?
That's the topic of the stream, like politics and occultism.
Well,
I mean,
we did
it's
about
very
the connections of
it's very there is a strong connection between the two, because if you see that, for instance, there's a strong connection of like spirituality or at least theological institutions with politics. So because of that, you're obviously going to get also connections between like esoteric or mystical institutions with politics. And there is a strong something I will say to people that they're not aware of, which is something that's quite fascinating, is the stock exchange is a purely Freemasonic thing, because it was the Knights Templar that were the first banking system, and they were the first people who established the city of London, which is one of the biggest exchange markets. And actually, even the coloration of the idea of the coloration between red and blue is based on the blood flow. So the veins and the arteries, red and blue. Originally, if you look at the stock exchange, you'll see that it was red and blue, but it was red and green, sorry. And then it became red and blue. So the blue is the green. It's the same thing. And that was the origination. It's to do with the blood flow, because the idea of the stock exchange, the idea of the banking, the circulation of the banking system, credit and loans and debt, it's all related to this. It's related to a blood flow. That's why if something happens somewhere in the world is seen as a living thing, a Gog Magog. That if something happens like in the stomach or the gut or the intestines of the world, then it's going to affect badly with the blood flow, and that's how it functions. And that's the mystical approach. You talk to any banker, like high ranking trader or banker anywhere in the city of London, they say, oh yeah, I know that. They'll say yes. And I've talked to many and they were like, oh yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, of course. Yeah, I know that.
So this approach basically helps you a lot about of understanding the world and how it functions, how it ticks, and
but I would recommend people look into Ronald Bernard. Listen to what he has to say. He did a whole interview about this in the Netherlands, about the people that I was exposed to in Belgium and he was exposed to. And it's usually why I can trust if someone really has encountered the same people that I did. Because most people, they say, oh, they're Satanists, but that's not the case. You'll know if the people really did encounter this group if they say their name. And he said the name. So look at the interview.
How did you say Ronald?
Ronald Bernard. If you
Bernard.
type in, I'm just checking it now as well. Ronald Bernard. There's an interview with him. I think it's about 30 minutes. It's in parts. You can find it on YouTube as well. And he discusses about how he got into the banking business, and then what happened, and etc. And then he encountered these people. So it goes into detail what you were asking about. And this is the same group that I encountered. But I just won't say who they are because of my own interest. Like I don't want any problems with these people. So
for sure.
Yeah.
So right, guys, I think we have to slowly finish because it shows me it's less than a minute left. We are still on air, but I don't know how it goes. Maybe the higher powers and Freemasons gave us 10 minutes more to spread the message.
I just want to say that not all, like a very large proportion of them are on the good side as well, and that they're fighting the bad people. I know people in there that are telling me that there's a war